headline of our podcast is a $30 million exit in your 30s. Welcome. The Ugly Truth About Sales podcast, producing live out of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, hosted by me, Victor Arocho. This podcast is about sales reality, sales perception, execution, and the hollow statements that entrepreneurs make, people make, and executives make. We discuss how to get past these ugly truths by taking action. We interview successful entrepreneurs, executives, and sales professionals who share their experiences on how to succeed, how they've succeeded by following best practices to grow their business and the business of others. Now, if you haven't yet, please follow me on Twitter at @VArocho. That's Victor, V like Victor, AROCHO. YouTube, where all of our podcasts and information is there. YouTube, Victor Arocho. And you could always go to Victor, AROCHO, Arocho.com. It's my website where you have free material, podcasts, anything that could help you to grow your business or grow yourself as a sales professional. Guest host is the one and only David Lekach. Did I say that correct?
Yes, sir.
Lekach, right?
Yeah.
All right. David Lekach. I've known him for some time. He has founded Dream Products LLC, and he sold the company in May of 2018 for $30 million. That's super impressive, particularly in that time frame. Okay. He at Dream Products manufactures and markets Dream Water, a natural, zero-calorie, 2.5 ounce liquid sleep enhancer that also is available in powder format that you could take with or without water. Prior to the sale of his company, David was the chief executive officer of Dream Products LLC. As the architect of the company's growth strategy, David was responsible for managing all aspects of the business. From this all included sales, marketing, manufacturing, and finance. David, impressive, holds a bachelor's degree, bachelor administration degree from the University of Michigan, an excellent school, and both a JD and MBA from the University of Miami. The U. He is admitted to practice law in the state of Florida. So again, I gotta tell my kids, having a law degree is always good for you. Doesn't mean you have to practice law. Is that correct, David?
Yeah. I don't tend to publicize the lawyer aspect. I like to say that if somebody's going to think that I'm an asshole, let them think I'm an asshole, not because I'm a lawyer.
So you lawyers out there, we don't mean anything. There's only a particular lawyer. I own an insurance company, so there's certain pit lawyers that are a little difficult.
Yeah.
But the point being is for you young ones that are listening out there, a law degree is I believe is one of the best degrees you could have because you could do so many things with it. You're well versed with a law degree. I would even take that over an MBA in my opinion, right? Not that I wouldn't take an MBA, but a law degree helps you do many things. An agent, I know so many people, executives and entrepreneurs with a law degree that are not practicing law, and they're just phenomenal business people. Well, David, welcome to my show. Welcome to the Ugly Truth podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, great. How's everything going for you?
Not too bad. It's a Friday, getting into the weekend, so looking forward to that.
Enjoying yourself. I mean, I'd be still riding, be popping champagne. So David, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and we're going to go over a few other things on what made you successful and what you could tell other people to don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and that'll help you. And we all find ourselves in that position, right? Because you have to go back to basics. It's not like no one's perfect, but you got to remember to go back. So David, one of the questions I want to ask you is, and I'm going to put my glasses on for this, how did you unify the communication since you did all of those pieces between sales, marketing, manufacturing, and the finance team? Because one of the key pieces in sales that I see is too many times companies have them siloed and one division doesn't know what the other division is doing. How did you overcome that piece?
Where to start with that answer? I guess on a very broad basis, I would always say internally that everybody at Dreamwater, starting with myself, created our own jobs. I always thought it was very important, and we started this with 4 of us. I brought in 3 people, and sort of we siloed into roles: marketing, ops, sales, and then me as sort of everything else. And I always made it a practice to be really good and really in the trenches with my head of sales, my head of marketing, my head of manufacturing, and so on and so forth, so that I can be supportive and helpful to them, that I would know what's going on at all times, that I could be that bridge between the different departments and segments that we had and the people that we had, to make sure that we have alignment. I didn't do it academically. It wasn't like, hey, here's I read this in this book, or I learned this in this classroom. I didn't do it academically, just sort of how it flowed and how it made sense to me and to us. And there's that. I guess that's how it happened and how it started. And I always would kind of say I was the redundancy to anybody. So God forbid somebody gets hit by a bus, we're not completely, effed, because I can always step in, at least for, till we found somebody else to handle the role. But we also didn't have a lot of employee turnover, so that helped.
And when you say you didn't do it academically, can you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like, you learn certain things in school, or from a company that you're working for, what have you, and it wasn't by design. In other words, it wasn't like, hey, I learned this, so now I'm going to go implement this here in my organization. It was just sort of how it flowed, how it worked from basically day one. So that's what I mean, that it wasn't academic. It was just how we did it, and it made sense to us.
Okay, interesting. I always believe that what you learn today usually comes out later in the future. So like when we teach or transform sales, sometimes I tell them, look, I'm just building your toolbox, but maybe a year from now, you're going to be able to utilize this. You're going to remember what we taught you back then, right? So that's interesting. So when you said you were the bridge, were you having joint meetings with those teams, or you were just making sure you knew what was going on with each of those divisions, or was the communication coming together?
Both.
Excuse me.
To your point, you can't sell what you can't make, for argument's sake, right? So we're in the products business, and you can't sell what you can't make, and then also what you're selling into what channels, and how, for us at least, would inform a lot of the product development side of the equation, the packaging, the product development, and so on and so forth, the branding. So it was very symbiotic all the way around, and we always looked at it like it would flow, right? And there would be a balance, between all the different functions.
So the functions would communicate with each other, knowing what was going on at all?
Yes. Again, we weren't at our biggest in Miami, not every employee worked out of Miami for us. We were headquartered here, but basically we would say, since we started, you have a computer and a laptop, a laptop and a cell phone, and you can work from wherever. So not everybody was in Miami, but when we sold, we were maybe 15 full-time employees, somewhere in Mexico. My head of manufacturing was in Dallas. We manufactured between Dallas and Phoenix, primarily, and so on and so forth. What I can tell you, though, is that we did have, and I like to say it was like my MBA. Early on in the Dreamwater experience, I was lucky enough to meet he was still the head of sales for Johnson & Johnson US or North America, right before he retired. So he was running a multi-billion-dollar book of business for Johnson & Johnson, and I learned so much from this guy, Frank. And so with Frank, we would actually do, for a couple of years there toward the beginning, every 4 weeks, but then that was very time consuming. We went every 6 weeks, more or less. And every 6 weeks he would fly into town, into Miami, and we would have a round table. Like, we'd have a 360 review of every aspect of the business over a day and a half to 2 day time period. So every 6 weeks we had to kind of report, and it forced us to think on the higher level sides of the business. But it was also a moment in time where we were able to be all connected and make sure that the different people are hearing it, not just that it's siloing through me. So we did a mixture of everything. And again, we weren't that big, and we had kind of an open office, flow and space. So there was a lot of communication between team members anyway for us.
Awesome. So the gentleman from Johnson & Johnson would fly in every 6 weeks, and that was your accountability kind of?
At the beginning, yeah. At the beginning, it was like every 4 weeks. But we were just like, hey, it takes a lot of work to prep for it. And then you'd be wanting to execute so you look good in the next meeting. And then it was just, we moved to about every 6 weeks. And I feel like that was a pretty good cadence for us for anybody that's listening, you got to find your own cadence. You got to find sort of what works for you. But I think that the way Frank would speak to us and interact with us and teach us, it worked for us. So in other words, like, it's sort of all lined up, again, not on purpose. It wasn't necessarily by design, but it kind of worked. And then we fixed the cadence as we felt that we can get value out of it. We weren't doing it for the sake of just doing it, right? We didn't have to. So that's how. What's that?
And he volunteered for this?
Yeah, he ended up being one of our investors. So it was sort of in his best interest to do that. But there was really a personal connection that to this day still exists.
Right.
So it was interesting. Plus his mom, he was up in New Jersey at the time, and his mom lived down here in Hollywood. So there was, he
Jersey. I'm a Jersey boy.
Yeah. So,
Oh, that's awesome. So that's so I have a couple pieces to ask off of that, right? And you already answered my second question, which is great. How did you make this happen? So, British can't sell what you can't make. Okay, what do you mean by you can't sell what you can't make?
Like, we worked with all the Dream Water. We were primarily focused on the food, drug, mass side of the equation in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico and other parts of the world. And we also did airport travel retail. So chances are, whether you know about Dream Water or not, when you fly, you'll see a little Dream Water shot sitting at the check stands of Hudson News, Parity Shops, all these airport retailers across North America. But the point is that if I can't produce it, right? If I can't physically make the product, then how do I sell it? So if my sales guy goes out and gets a huge order from Walmart, or, and a lot of times I'd be that guy also, but if we get a big order, or, the thing just starts to take off and all that stuff, we have to be ready from a production perspective and from a logistics perspective as well. We have to be able to fill that demand and ship on time. In our industry with the food, drug, mass retailers, you have shipment windows, in which case that's when it has to arrive. And there's a lot of details that goes into that. So all of that aspect of the organization has to be aligned for us to ultimately have success in selling into the trade, or on your own website, or on Amazon, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's why everybody has to be aligned, particularly when in a product business, or that's not even true, not even product business, in anything. Like, so for example, we had a client that I literally, our company, we grew ourselves out of the client. It was an IT developer, right, that was creating applications. So we were bringing in so much business that they weren't able to hire the programmers fast enough. And then they have what's called business analysts, and it was, a 5-lane highway going into one person. So that always goes to watch the fulfillment, right? So I always tell clients, and I understand that, look, you need to know when to call uncle, because you're putting me in a bad position as we grow. Can you fulfill? And then sometimes some of the executives will have, well, how are we going to fulfill this? Like, say if we were doing something with you and we're selling and we were outside back in the day, I would go to someone, that's not my problem. That's David's problem, right? He's got to fulfill it because I stayed in my lane, right? So that's interesting.
Yeah, but I can touch on that a little bit, even more, let's say concretely. My younger brother has one of the largest cannabis operations in the state of Massachusetts. And he's going to convert, you get up to 3 stores. So he has 3 stores, and he's going to convert the first of his 3 stores from medical to recreational for adult use consumption. And let's just say that the order of magnitude in terms of sales right now at the retail level is going to go up 10x at a minimum, from going from medical only to medical and adult use. And it's easy to sit there and say, wow, look at what's going to happen with the sales and all that. But we're vertically integrated in Massachusetts, which means that we have to grow, extract, process, package, and everything ourselves for our own stores. And so as we're getting ready for this conversion, which could happen as early as by next weekend, that store will be selling adult use. We had to have some really gut-checking conversations around not just being able to grow the flower, which is not easy, certainly with the restrictions in Massachusetts, but also packaging it. So you have the flower and you've done everything you have to do for that, but now you have to put it in little bags or jars or whatever the packaging is. And when you start to realize where those bottlenecks and constraints are, how are you ever going to hit that sales ramp if every aspect of that isn't aligned. So, you know, we all go through that in our own ways, whether you're in the service business or consumer products or retail, you know, all along the way. That's part of what we're experiencing right now to hit those sales. There's just so much back end work that we have to do. And that's where our focus is, right?
Interesting. By the way, Florida is vertical. Is pretty much every state is vertical.
No.
Florida is a vertical market in medicinal cannabis as well.
For now, we'll see how the laws end up shaking.
Where I don't want to get off topic. What they are doing is hemp is not vertical, which is hemp is going to, they expect Florida to be one of the largest distributor or largest growers in the country. So that's amazing.
I say the word weed and we end up getting off on a tangent.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize.
Between hemp and Dream Water, you know, we go from. Yeah. I could tell you this: how many times have I told you? I was, as a friend, a fellow entrepreneur, I was always so proud every time I saw your product somewhere. I was like, that's my friend. You know, it's just a different, you know, so many products out there, right? You don't know anything, right? But I'm walking in line in Walgreens, or if I go from the airport, I don't care where it was almost, and I don't know why, it's just, I guess, an endorphin that comes up.
I get excited about it too.
The owner behind that. And remember, I've told you a couple times, I saw your product, man. Yeah. You know, if I'm with kids, because, you know, you want to teach your kids entrepreneurship. That's a friend of mine. You know, now I can tell them what happened afterwards.
I get that same state of euphoria, you know, that the process of creating something and then putting it out in the world and working with the biggest retailers in the world and so on and so forth. And then, you know, seeing the feedback loop come all the way in by way of customer feedback and emails and outreach and what have you. It's really, really amazing. And, you know, being in the consumer product space for about a decade at this point, I made a lot of friends. And so I get the same sense of euphoria, not just when I see my own stuff and all that. I get the biggest kick when I hear back from the consumer, not to go too far off on that tangent, but I get the same kick when I see, oh, that's my buddy's whatever. And, you know, because I dig it. And it's so hard, right? What isn't hard, but it is so hard. So many things have to align, especially when you're creating something that has never been done before or a better version of it or what have you. So, yeah, I get the same sense of euphoria.
Yeah. And, you know, and it's also, the euphoria is even higher because it's in a major store. You know, it's not like you know, you just walk into a store and you happen to see it. These are Walgreens, airports. So, you know, God bless you. You know, I wanted to ask, based on what you were saying, here's where I'm telling you about false or hollow statements, right? And I get this a lot, and it's frustrating for me because I always believe if you can produce, I don't care where you're at, right? So I got a couple pieces. One, you know how you were talking about your brother in Massachusetts and you're looking through the chain and making sure everything works. You know, the sad part for me, what I found is everybody's always looking for the efficiencies across the board, from the manufacturing to the packaging to the delivery. You're constantly overlooking to see how you can improve those efficiencies. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally.
The area that they rarely look at or audit or see what they could do better is the sales process, the sales technology, the sales system. That is left alone just to, well, you should know how to sell it, right? And that's one thing we try to communicate, which to me, again, is okay, you understand that you should be managing what you're measuring, but you're not doing that in sales, right? And then the other thing is, that I hear a lot about, or you know, everyone loves to talk about culture, and they don't understand that you can still have a great culture with people telecommuting. You just gave an example in your company that sold for $30 million, and you know they're going to grow it. And you just said you had people from all over the place. Well, you know, again, there's times that we have some people that we manage from clients over here, but then they want to bring them their office because they want that culture. But you know, think about it. The largest companies in the world have to have people in different places, right? And what are your thoughts on that? On keeping a good culture with people that are across the globe? So,
two very big, very loaded questions. Feel free to cut me off and jump in as we have this conversation. But it's worth noting that in Dream Water, we're not necessarily potentially I don't know what most of your client base looks like, but you know, you're coaching them. You have to make a certain amount of calls and outreach touch points, and you have enough touch points, and then that leads to a business and a sale or whatever. For us, our sales cycles and our sales processes were very different, right? You'd go and you'd have a meeting once or twice a year with Walgreens in Chicago. You'd see them at a trade show here or there, and we would be very prepared on a very specific set of whatever we wanted to discuss with said retailer in that moment. And it's not like they say, yes, I'll buy 10 from you right now. That's not how our sales is not like that. Our sales, for the most part, were transacted computer to computer. You know, Walgreens systems are saying to our systems, you know, how much to order. So it wasn't like, here, let me sell you stuff, whatever. But for us, it was more about positioning, brand management, discussing, you know, volume and what are we seeing in the trends, and how can we build our business together. And again, it was a very long lead time process. It wasn't a function of you hit enough people and you sell more, right? It was more, you get the right program, you get the right elements of the program in place and the right marketing elements and whatever, and that can help conceptually lead to better, bigger, better sales. So I just want to say that because for us, we were, even from our inception, one of the first hires or people that we ended up sort of shifting into that role was a data analyst role. And even when I got bought, when we sold the company, one of the key remarks that the acquirer made to me was, it's incredible that a business your size, in other words, that we're still relatively small, that a business your size has an in-house data analyst. But for me, there is a lot of data out there, not to measure the sales process, but to understand what the market is telling you is happening. And we would bring whatever we would see by way of insights into the data that we were able to collect and work that into our sales process, work that into our insights and statements that we'd make to Walgreens or Walmart or what have you, but backing it up with numbers and all that stuff. So we measured sort of in as much as we could what was happening in the marketplace so that we can understand, so that we can learn, so that can inform when we would put together a presentation, when we would put together a plan. And we also took it very seriously that we would take we would never come in with a generic presentation ever. We also never let brokers, which is very common in our business, sales reps, brokers,
manufacturer reps,
to help you service these accounts. I don't care how small the account was. If it required a headquarter call, you know, a sales call, one of my salespeople was there with the broker. And so we're in Miami, and at the time there was a smaller regional grocer named Albertsons in the Northwest. They are now much bigger, but there was that. And so, you know, I had my guys and girls here in Miami going up to Idaho, you know, to take those meetings. When Safeway and Albertsons bought each other, that we were one of the companies, because it's so far for anybody from New York, from wherever, to go to Idaho, or wherever they were, Wyoming, Idaho, I think it was Idaho. So that we would do that kind of stuff, I think it paid dividends all around, but also because from a learning perspective, I didn't want to hear what the broker wanted to tell me. I always wanted to know and have the direct interaction with the buyer, the category manager, the department head, or whoever we were meeting with at that time. So anyway, so that was our sales process more.
Let me expand on that piece. Okay, so maybe I misstated it. For me, it's not about just the sale, because to me that's all about the sales process. But sales process could be also surgical. For me is so. For example, the data analyst. Where were you getting the data from? From the stores. And then when your people went with the brokers, they were coming back and giving you information and data, correct?
Yeah, for the bigger retailers, I was always there. I might have an extra salesperson on my side with me or not, but so I had a good sense and a good pulse, and I'd usually be the one delivering it.
But then you would also come back and figure out what else you would need, right? As you kept learning from those meetings.
Correct.
To gain more data. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
And then you would improve it.
Correct. And one of the things, by the way, for whoever's listening out there, one of the things I learned from Frank would take some of the meetings with us. And I remember Frank we took a meeting. We went to Bentonville, Arkansas for one of many meetings with Walmart. He taught me the power of asking the buyer. So, you get 30 minutes, 60 minutes, once a year, twice a year, you're all excited and it's so important and nerve wracking. But he taught me the power of pausing, asking them questions, and listening. So we're all sitting there saying, I have to jam so much information into a 30-minute meeting or a 60-minute pitch or whatever. And that I found that that wasn't the best way, necessarily to do that and to approach it. And I would actually lead with questions first, no matter what I was prepared to do. And I've never pitched, here's slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, slide 4, even though I was tight with it. I did eventually get better at making it a conversation. And I never pitched sequentially, here's all my slides. I had the slides so I could support what I was saying out loud. And I knew obviously what order it was in and what have you, but that was that. From
Culture.
From what?
From the culture perspective, from going out.
So yeah. So what you asked me also about the data. So Walmart gives you incredibly granular data. You can tap into it. The other retailers would often do that too. Maybe it's on a weekly basis versus Walmart could be hourly and daily and whatever. It depends on how well you want to tap into it. A lot of times we would use brokers to be able to access the data or feed us the data in a way that the data analyst liked it. And she was amazing. I called her an Excel wizard because she'd take millions of lines of data and just be able to spit out what it's saying, whatever was great. But that was very important to us. So we would be able to when we could get the data, we'd be able to get it from typically POS, point of sale, registered data, what have you. And then we would be able to understand things from there. Sometimes we do, research studies to try to understand more about sleep or the consumer mindset or what have you. But again, there were certain things that we can measure along the way, and that's what we do there. So that was to answer your data part. The culture part, again, I'd like to take credit for it. I'm sure, obviously, I had a substantial impact on it, but I would say that I'll probably never have a better workplace culture experience. And mind you, to your point, not everybody was in Miami, but I don't think I'll ever have as good a workplace culture as I did, say, the first 3 years of Dreamwater. I sold it in year 9. The first 3 years of Dreamwater, I was the elder statesman. I started Dreamwater when I was 30 years old. I sold it at 38, 39. Or maybe I was 29. I sold at 38. But point is that I was the elder statesman for the most part. I mean, now you see the gray, but I've had the gray for a long time. And I was the elder statesman. And it, again, even that wasn't by design. It's just how it worked out. And we, a lot of us lived together. We would go out together. So it was just one of those things that I would say. I remember back in the day, I would say, I'm coming in on Sunday fun day. I would literally say Sunday fun day probably before it was cool and on a meme or whatever.
Flying out to go meet with your people.
No. I'd have people here in Miami, but I had to catch up. There's not enough hours in the day, especially at the beginning of the Dreamwater experience. And I just say, I'm coming in on Sunday fun day. And I'd show up on a Sunday, whatever. There'd be a bunch of people already in the office just because we would like it. We would like to hang out. We would like to interact with each other, push each other. We were working on something that was so much cooler and bigger than us. I mean, there had never been this sort of mainstream liquid sleep aid out there ever. Cracking the code with these big retailers. I mean, again, you're talking about the biggest retailers in the world. Who else would give a 25-year-old kid the chance to do that kind of stuff? Now, I didn't do that because of that. And again, age wasn't pro or con for me. It was, I would evaluate the person and say, do you have the competency and the skill set? And do I trust you to go do some of these things? But the point is that all of us were doing stuff that we had never done before. And we kept kind of progressing. And there was this real camaraderie across the whole company that it just felt right. And then we had our highest highs and lowest lows with Walmart. It happens to be in a 4-month span in 2013. And that started this sort of downward trend in the business itself, right? With Walmart, who was my biggest client at the time. But we survived and stabilized, and then we started to grow back again, build a whole innovation pipeline. But I felt what it was like. I didn't have a great culture by design. It happened, and I think it's because I was setting the tone along the way. But I felt it when I didn't have a good culture, and that I felt, and that sucked. Even though it was a lot of us the same, whatever. But it took me, to get out of a little bit of a funk, and how do you handle this kind of stuff and whatever. And again, there's a lot of details that goes into that, but to come out of that funk, to be able to keep going. So I know what it's like to have an amazing culture, and it'll probably be the best culture I will have ever had. And it wasn't because I read a book or I heard some awesome EO speaker or anything like that. Equally, I know what it's like to not have a great culture. Still very close and very friendly. I mean, it's been over a year since we sold Dreamwater. I'm still very tight with a lot of my people. I would always say internally, my goal here is that you're a better person and a better professional for having had Dreamwater as an experience in your journey of life and work. And I can tell you that one of the things that makes me the proudest is having my people continue to check in with me, that we've built real relationships and where they're saying, hey, I've now gone out into the world and man, what you taught me here, what you did for me there. And none of that was on purpose. It was just me being me and my coworkers being them. But the combination of all of that, it really is something that matters to me and mattered to me, which was that you're better off for having this as an experience. And that I could tell you a year and change after selling, it's very much, I think one of the things I'm proudest about in the whole experience. And I say all that in the context of culture, right? And having had good and bad, neither on purpose.
But I guess my point being is that you could have a great culture without having everybody in the same building.
Yeah. Yes, I would say certainly this decade. Look, our first full year was 2010. And like I said to you, we really launched, even though we're a Miami-based company, we launched in New York City. We launched in mid-December 2009 with Dwayne Reed in New York City with the idea of putting the city that never sleeps to sleep. And we were very, very hyper-focused, geographically speaking, in not just New York. We were very hyper-focused in a subset of Manhattan. And so it didn't matter that we were a Miami-based company or anything like that. A bunch of us have lived in New York and we knew New York very well, but that's where we started. And I think that's one of the interesting things about corporations in today's day and age. You can really be anywhere and do a lot of amazing things. It doesn't have to be in the office, but again, you feel culture permeating, whether you're physically next to each other or, out traveling or in the world or wherever you happen to be. You feel
and I agree with that. Today with the technology like we're doing today, I do business in China, India, we have conversations. So
you can video chat, and so you still get the in-person interaction.
You'll get the in-person interaction, and then you make it a point to go and see them and make sure they're in the culture and just talk to them. But it goes back to, I'm just saying, there's too many entrepreneurs that are so wanting to have everybody under one roof that sometimes people like the flexibility of being able to work from home, right? Or have the flexibility to do other things. So it just depends. I just don't think that culture has to be driven just by having everybody in one office. And then number two, you made a good comment that, sometimes when you see the culture getting out of not the culture you want, you have to bring it back to the culture you want. So, we're always taught that if you don't drive the culture will take a sense of its own, right? So you got to decide the culture you want and make sure you're driving it, and then listen to the culture that they want as well. Teach you 6 weeks, report to culture, data, need a review. So here's an example. Like I had told you earlier that you have a data analyst, right? And again, from what I do, I'm more from the sales transformation side, from the executives and the CEOs who really want to grow. It's about the data, and they're not used to that, right? The adoption of a CRM in sales companies is extremely low. Right. So they don't have the benefit of people sending the data like you have. That's fantastic. So they have to go out there and make sure that they're acquiring the data. But the way your company grew, you were getting the data, but just because you get the data, you needed someone to analyze it and then to be able to make a presentation or suggestion or show you, or you would look at it. But that again goes to you're measuring, you're managing the data that you're measuring, right? And if you don't do that, I think in any type of business, you're gonna have a problem. Makes sense?
Again, it was just logical and natural for us to do that, and we approached it from a learning first perspective, not saying, hey, we're super smart and we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna dictate it. It was trying to get enough touch points out there in the world to dictate things to us, to open our eyes to things, to open up our minds to certain things. I never forced her, even though I guess her title was data analyst. She wasn't a great analyst, but she was a great data organizer and synthesizer and outputter. So a lot of times, whether it was me or somebody else on my team, we would work hand in hand with her. right? She could do certain things that I can't do, but the analysis part was usually us, or the thinking, or it would be me or somebody else, sort of higher up. It's not about forcing somebody to do something that they can't do. It's about playing it, for me, into their strengths, and how does that sort of fit within the aggregate. If I could have gotten more data, by the way, I was always hungry for it, because I wanted to understand and contextualize it, right? Numbers are numbers, and I could present you numbers that the same set of numbers, and it'll tell one story versus the other. And so, there was that aspect of it. But again, we did it from a learning perspective, not if you measure it, it'll get done perspective. That's not what we were using data for. It was to learn. We used a lot of what we were seeing out there in the world, and in our data, and what we were seeing out there in the world to inform and develop our own innovation pipeline. By the time I sold the company, we had already experimented in a variety of ways with CBD, with THC, with we actually had started to commercialize Dream Water Beauty, so a beauty regimen along with the Dream Water formula, a nighttime beauty regimen. We had a Dream Water Sport for nighttime muscle recovery, and it wasn't that we were sitting there saying, "Hey guys, let's do this." It was sort of trying to understand and seeing what was going on there in the marketplace, and having that inform things to us. We would see what's out there in the world, and what the data, whatever data we were looking at, or whatever we could get, and that would inform our packaging and our statements and the things that we were trying to resonate with. So, it was a little different. It wasn't like, did you call, the 20 touch points and convert two of them? And then, it wasn't that kind of data.
Don't I appreciate what you're saying. Don't combine that I'm measuring it only from sales, right? I've been fortunate I was a COO at 32. So I've run operations, I've acquired companies, I've raised money, but after doing a presentation in EO in my forum, that was the first time I found out that not all entrepreneurs can sell, right? Or scale. I thought every entrepreneur was a salesperson because they built their business. And I find out that, they can get their business to the $1 million, $2 million mark. And then all of a sudden they're the only salesperson. And how do I scale? And how do I manage and right people? So what I'm saying about measuring, we may have different definitions of it. To me, what I'm hearing you, to me, it was a measurement. It was a measurement, but it wasn't a measurement on how many data points. It was a measurement of what was that data representing, right?
Correct.
What was that representing from a customer standpoint, from the end consumer standpoint, right? The data, what was the data representing from, is this product working or is this product not working, right? And experimenting. So to me, that's measuring, right? I'm not measuring just how many units or so forth, but I'm measuring the information that's coming back to me to make better decisions on either packaging, distribution, the type of client. That's what I mean from a global standpoint, right? So like when I owned an insurance company, I had to you have to manage data at a ferocious level because of the claims, because of the losses, right? So that's a different measurement, but they didn't necessarily measure the sales side. I did because that's my background. So I think that we're talking the same thing. It's just different vernacular. But obviously you did all the right things to take action based on feedback and the data that came inside to you.
I don't want it to come off like I did a bunch of right things. We did enough right things versus wrong things that we had a happy ending with a lot of hiccups in between. So lest anybody sit here and say, yeah, we could look at the outcome and say, hey, the outcome was good. But trust me, man, most days are freaking terrible, right? You walk in there, and in my position, when you're in that number one chair and in that CEO chair, good or bad, you have to, get ready up here to be able to lead your team, stay focused, make sure that the priorities are right, and hopefully enough of the right things happen in a sequential order that would allow you to live until tomorrow to have a good outcome at the end. But I don't want anybody who's watching this or seeing this to think like, hey man, look, we got it all right, man. We did not get a lot of things right, for whatever that's worth.
Well, yeah, well, for those of you that we're going to put this on audio, when he sit up here, he was pointing at his brain. And same thing in sales or anything. Michael Jordan will tell you 90% of his success was mental, 10% was skill. So you could, there's people walking the street that got phenomenal skill sets that can play professional sports, but their mindset wasn't there. So that's true. And two, I think that real players, real sales professionals, people that want to make real money, whether they're going to exit or not going to exit, need to understand that nobody's perfect, but you got to fail fast, right? And you got to learn from your failures to be able to be successful, right? So nobody's perfect. There's times I fell off my sales process, and 90% of the time I would lose. And I'd have to say, why was I doing it that way? And usually that happens because I'm doing business with a friend. Instead of following the right process, I'm just buying into what they want and so forth, and it never works out. So, but I appreciate the humility and you being humble after selling for 30 million. So remember that, always be humble.
No, but you just use the cliche also right now of fail fast. And for me, it wasn't about failing fast, although I think that's very important because that's hard to do depending on how invested you are in that process or that outcome. It's about making sure that before you went into the process in the first place, at least for me, you've set up learning parameters. In the context of learning, you can allow yourself to fail, right? And I'm not going to get into the whole philosophical aspect of that, but thinking about these, what do you call them, hollow statements or whatever, fail fast. It sounds easy to say out loud, but my way of failing fast was really giving all of us the permission to fail first. And number two, that it's not a failure if you set up the learning process. Now, if you didn't set up any learning parameters to either adjust or know not to do that again, that's when I would get pissed off. Because then we just did that activity, that process, that expenditure for no reason. But if we did the expenditure because it was well-reasoned and well thought through and all of that, and then the outcome wasn't what we expected, I'm okay with that. And so that to me is how, it would be about failing fast, but equally also about maybe failing or doing it correctly fast also, right? So if you can gather anything in the learning parameters that you set up for whatever the task or idea or process that you were working on was, and you see something working, equally iterate faster to make that even better. And again, I keep saying not to get off on too much of a tangent because there's so many good things to talk about here, but my perspective on all of this, and I learned this really from my dad, who is a much bigger, much more awesome entrepreneur than I am so far at this stage in the game. My dad is the one who
shout out to dad.
My dad is always the one that pushed me, and this always resonates and sits with me. Is as humans, we tend to focus on what's not working and try to fix that. My dad was always saying, "There's a bunch of things that won't work. Double down on what is working." Because the net result of doubling down on what is working and really focusing on what's working and making that grow and get better will be exponentially bigger than fixing something and making it. Effectively, he would say, let's say you can get 100% growth. You dedicate your time and your mind, and you figure out how to crack 100% growth, right? Would you prefer 100% growth on a store that's selling 1 unit or on a store that's selling 10? Because if you dedicate the same amount of effort, resources, whatever, to get that 100% growth on a store that's selling 10 units, you've made up for 20 bad stores, effectively, right? So that always resonated with me. And I think, especially whoever's listening to this from whatever perspective, including on the sales side, is focus on your strengths and double down on those, and then double down on that, because your results should be infinitely more exponential than just getting everything to be kind of okay,
Yeah. So interesting. When I say fail fast, just so for the listeners to clarify it, and about the ugly truth of sales or ugly truth of business is, I walk the walk, right? So meaning, for example, we're doing these podcasts. I was doing these podcasts via Zoom live, right? And streaming it to Facebook. I was having too much problems, and then I had to shift it, right? But after only 4 of them right in a row, that's what I mean. I went after it, tried it, didn't like how it worked, and moved, right? There was no really expense in it. The opposite side is, I agree about, just don't jump into something that economically can hurt you because you're just going to try to fail fast, right? So there's got to, like I've always told people and that work for me and the teams that I've had, listen, if you make a mistake, I'm okay with the mistake. What I want to know, what was the logic about you making that decision? If you can give me the good logic of the reasoning, I'm okay with the mistake. If you just did it to do it, and there's no logic about doing something bad or incorrectly, I got a problem with it. Make sense?
Yep.
So they're just a combination, and it goes back to anything, you know, hey, I want to do this, and that's great. Awesome, we want to do it. But after you look at the economics, it's going to cost $1 million. Okay, great idea, but we're not going to spend $1 million on it, right? It's not going to be worth the return. So the next question I have for you is, what was the most challenging for you? I see you did online sales, and most of yours was distribution sales. Which was the most challenging for you?
In terms of sales?
Yeah, like, because I see you do online. I guess that came afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, we were very focused on real world, what I call real world food, drug, mass, and airport for the most part, and in different markets, and so on and so forth. That presents certain challenges, obviously, because you're dealing with very, very big, large bureaucratic organizations. You know, getting them to say yes. You know, you don't get a lot of margin of error with these accounts, you know, or things like that. And it wears on you too, right? Like, you know, the stress of it, the management of it, all that weighs on you. We started to get good at Amazon by accident early on. We ended up at the time of selling being a multi-7-figure seller of Dreamwater on Amazon, but we got good on Amazon by accident. But what I found was I really enjoyed that process. Again, selling on Amazon is different than selling to Walmart, and it's different than selling to Walgreens, and so on and so forth. So I just enjoyed, you know, that process. And what I had been working on at Dreamwater at the time of the exit was building out our, what I called digital ecosystem beyond Amazon. So to include Amazon, but not just that we had a strong presence on Amazon. And I think that if I had taken a more aggressive digital strategy, which encompasses a lot of things, and if I had been better at that and more focused on that way earlier on, again, I even admit that Amazon sort of happened by accident for us. It was somewhat on purpose on my part, but still didn't expect it to get into, you know, what it was and you know, the profitability of it and so on and so forth. But I feel like if I had been able to understand and get the human resources and the organizational resources I needed in place to be strong digitally, you see all these digital native brands now that sell for a lot more than what I sold for and all that. But that's not why. But if I had been more attuned to that and more focused on that, I think we could have made a lot of waves and grown to be a lot bigger and more recognizable than we otherwise were. And so that part was hard. And that's probably the thing that I sort of lament the most, generally speaking, you know, sort of on the frontline sales side of the process.
Interesting. And you said you have brokers out there. Are these are manufacturer reps? They were hired brokers? They were commission brokers? Or are they selling other products?
Yeah, every retailer has their set of people that maybe the former buyers, or, you know, they worked for one of the big CPG companies, consumer products companies, or what have you. And so every retailer tends to have the people that understand that retailer, that know how to work with the retailer, that know the people inside that building or buildings, as the case may be. And so, yes, I mean, a lot of people at companies big and small, you use those brokers also to make sure that when you're trying to cover off on X amount of you know, retailers, that you're able to know when are the reviews, prepare for it. Oh, I heard that said retailer is going to do this program, or they're going to do that, and this is now their initiative. They serve a generally important role in helping manage. You know, we were selling in over 30,000 doors, and so we had the W-2 internal employees, and we'd pair up with what we would try to be best in class sales reps or brokers into these accounts. But we were never under the impression that it was the broker's job to do much. It was always us collaborating, working. And like I said, we were at every meeting always.
It was the intro. The person was the intro.
It wasn't even the intro. It was more for management, for learning, for.
Well, I'm saying that the sales rep got the intro to that retailer.
Sure, that's helpful also. In a lot of cases, that's what a broker can do. Yes.
And how did you prevent them from, I'm assuming they sell other products. How did you feel like how did you know that they would, your product would be in the mix of all the products they sold?
I showed up for the meetings.
Oh, because they would have a meeting.
There would be
So
plenty of
when
companies
you were
that
at a meeting, they were selling some of their products, and then you had a portion of that meeting?
sometimes that's how it would go.
Or
Sometimes,
the meeting could have been all on Dream Water?
usually it would be like that, but yes, sometimes it'd be a part of a slate of things that they had to review with said category manager or buyer or whatever. And so it was a little mix of everything, but the biggest way is that we didn't let go of those touch points. That was very important for us to be there and to maintain at least that aspect of the relationship.
Okay. And then, this is a question I'm asking all my guest entrepreneurs. Why do you think companies, just in general, businesses in general, spend the so little money or the least amount of money in investing in their sales leadership and sales management?
I'm not entirely qualified to say how it is. You'd know a lot more about it than me. I should probably turn around and ask you that question. I believe in investing in your people. And so whether it was, there's a program out there called Landmark, and I made that available to all my employees, or, at different times I would hear CEO speakers, talk about, hey, we have a library of books and we incentivize people to check them out. I never got to the incentives part, but I always, whenever I'd get a book or whatever, I'd put it on a shelf and say, please guys, take it home and read it or whatever. I always felt that it was very important to invest in the people. I would often have trainers come to the office because I couldn't get myself out of the office at a certain point or whatever. But if they came to me, I had no excuse to not work out. But I made that available to everybody. It wasn't just for me. So from a fitness perspective, from a mental perspective, from a personal development and growth perspective, I think it's important to invest in your people, period, sales or otherwise. The better the person is, the more, bless you, the better the person is, the more well-rounded they are. In theory, that should be accretive to you and the rest of your team, right? But like I said, one of my core goals from a human resource, from a human perspective, was that people are better off having had Dream Water as an experience in their life, personally and professionally. And so with that in mind, it was very easy for me to say, hey guys, I want you to learn. And then when I joined the EO and the Entrepreneurs Organization and all these other things, like I just kept coming back and saying, here guys, look, and try to expose them to the things that I was getting exposed to. So I think it for me at least, it's something that I always did, tangentially, financially, directly, and so on and so forth. And for me, it's always been important to do that. We would have, people come in sometimes, to give us a talk, or if I was allowed to bring a guest to my, to the EEO event, I'd take somebody from my team. So for me, it was always important to develop the human, regardless of function, sales included. And so there was that.
All right. Well, I got to answer your question. I can't tell you why they do it, but I could tell you, I can't tell you why they spend the least amount, but that is the statistics. They actually spend more money on their salespeople than their sales manager, which is crazy. So my point being, with that said, what happens is too many companies they promote their best salesperson as a sales manager, right? And just because that person was doing the right thing in sales doesn't mean that person can manage, right? So there's leadership and there's management. Then there's sales leadership and there's sales management. Now there's a lot of leadership pieces that can parallel, but sales, leadership, and management is a different world. It's no different than the experience you were having on managing your clients, right? In sales, psychologically, you got to be the coach. You have to train them. You got to hold them accountable. Then you have to be able to make sure you're taking care of them, but also make sure you're doing the right thing from the executive standpoint. And so what happens is they go, okay, I hire a manager, go get them. You were doing well. Go make these people the same as you. Right. And then when I lectured in MBA classes at a couple universities where they had the sales management schools, and you could see that they weren't, it wasn't necessarily teaching the full spectrum of management and leadership as it relates to sales. Right. So, and then the other thing is I want to add to your point, because I love what you said and what your dad said, doubling down. Think about it. I have one sales manager that manages 10 people. Right. And I have 10 salespeople, right? So if I'm training heavily the one sales manager. Exponentially, the training rolls down to 10 people. If I'm only training salespeople, going to, come and see me at a workshop, going to see Tony Robbins, going to see something else, the sales leader, right? You're not going to get the same return. So you double down on your frontline sales leader, right? And I just don't think that they look at it from that perspective. Just go sell. Here's your numbers, and this is all you do. That management perspective is where companies, you should always develop with your people. Like you said, that's again one of those ugly truths or those hollow statements that everyone says, invest in your people. They're the most important. Then how do you not invest in your sales management? And when I say that also, we deal only with small and medium-sized businesses, and anywhere from $5 to $100 million. And there's also a lot of entrepreneurs that they need sales leadership and management training, because that's the only way they'll know if the hire of that sales manager is utilizing best practices, and then remove themselves. They don't, some of them like being in it, it's fine, but there's a large percentage that want people to sell for them. Or, for example, a lot of entrepreneurs I know, especially in EO, they'll be doing $2 million, $3 million, but they're the only salesperson. So if they stop selling, the company's got an issue. Now they got to be able to scale. So they also need to, you can go all to these great meeting events and so forth, but if you want to grow your company, you got to figure out how to manage that aspect of sales. And at least in my experience, only because then you can multiply, right? That you can put people in the system.
Again, it's also a function of, I think a lot of what's being said is, you got to understand what their actual role is, whether you're the manager or even the salesman. You got to understand what the sales process is. Again, my sales process is very different than probably traditional sales. Pick up the phone, send a certain amount of emails, and then it works, right? And so I think you got to understand that about, what you're trying to do. And a big part of this, that whoever's listening, I would hope that they take, is you got to find your own rhythm with this stuff, man. I've also heard Jack Daly speak several times and all that stuff. And there's the rule, you can't be the CEO and head of sales. That's a terrible thing. Like Jack Daly, that always resonated with me. But especially at the earlier stages of Dreamwater, I'm pitching Walgreens. And by the way, for me to even help my sales manager, whatever, I have to go through the experience myself of understanding what it takes to succeed in Chicago with Walgreens, what it takes to succeed in Northwest Arkansas and in Bentonville with Walmart, in Rhode Island with CVS, and so on and so on and so on, right? Cincinnati with Kroger. And so if I didn't go do that and understand and learn and what are the types of things that we need to be saying and how, I didn't really understand how to coach up the team. And I took that approach sort of in every department. But again, how do you reconcile that with let's say the Jack Daly approach? You can't be the CEO and the head of sales, right? That's a bad idea. I don't have an opinion on whether it's,
I disagree with, but that's fine.
I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I do understand, I think conceptually, that if you're running sales, that's a full-time job. And if you're the CEO, that's a full-time job too, right? It's hard to do two full-time jobs correctly, as a conceptual matter. But I could tell you, and maybe as a direct experience share anecdote, what allowed me to really sort of cement my younger brother at the time as my head of sales. He was one of the original 4 or 3 other people plus me that I pulled in to do Dreamwater at the outset. What really cemented him as my head of sales was circumstances of life. And sometimes as managers, and especially when you're at the outset of a process and you have never gone through the experience before, we micromanage these things because we do it better than anybody else, and all those things that are actually true. I don't think those are cliches. And it just happened to be that my son was born on February 1st, 2012. And my only vice really is that I would be a workaholic and all that, and it created problems. I eventually ended up getting divorced, but it created some issues and some problems for me personally. But one thing I wouldn't forgive myself is if I wasn't there for the birth of one of my kids. I have 2. And so those circumstances, if you can imagine, January in Rhode Island, and then in Chicago, we had meetings with CVS. In the second half of January, we had meetings with CVS, Chicago, and Rite Aid, which is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So 2 out of the 3 airports are substantially, or 2 out of the 3 retailers that we had to go to were substantially being serviced by regional commuter flights. There's no direct Miami to Harrisburg. There's no direct Miami to, maybe to Providence, but I don't even think that there's a direct to Providence. I don't know, right? So I said, man, it's January and it could be blizzards, and I don't really want to waste money on a private plane to fly back. You know, when I get that phone call, and what if I miss it? And all these things running through my mind. So life forced me to delegate that out finally. And what happened was my younger brother plus other team members, because he took 2 out of the 3, and then I actually had Frank take the other one. Frank went to Walgreens for me, and then Joseph took CVS and Rite Aid. And when we had a very successful set of meetings or whatever, sort of life showed me as a, let's call it more of a micromanager at the time, you know, and as I was building my own experience set, life showed me that if you prepare your team and, you know, you sort of lead by example, but you prepare your team and it isn't all about you, you can exponentially grow past that. And you can shift more into that management or shift more back into that CEO role. And I would say that that's the same thing that I could say about operations and logistics and marketing and so on and so forth. But specifically regarding sales, I did have that. And life is what forced me to become better at management and delegating than doing it myself.
Now, I just want to define what I meant by you can't be the CEO and head of sales is depending on the size of your company, right? So I agree with that statement because I've been there. The larger companies, when I was running $60 million, $250 million companies, I couldn't do all the pieces I needed to do, right? Either had a partner, you had someone else. But, you know, for the small, medium-sized business that's doing $2, maybe $10 million, right? There are times that you have to be, you know, if you got to cut people, you have to be now back into the sales, or you got to lead by example in sales, especially if that's how you're not, a lot of companies we deal with is because they're service companies, right? So you have to go into sales to manage these people, because if not, you know, you're going to be the solo salesperson. So now you're going to be the CEO and the salesperson, and you're going to be the only salesperson. As your company grows, that's where you got to diversify and try to find the right person and understand what you need to do and make sure you have your best practices and your knowledge. So that's why I just wanted to clarify that, right?
Sure.
And I agree when you get to a certain size, but what I see is a lot of entrepreneurs that, again, in small and medium-sized businesses, they hate taking on that sales leadership role because the sales leadership role requires holding people accountable at a faster pace, right? As opposed to an office manager or someone entering or manufacturing data input, you know, sales every day, you're knowing what's going on. So David, by the way, I represent a different college every day, and I'm usually in a suit like you see me. But this is Archbishop, the basketball team. Shout out to the coach, and I just want to Archbishop McCarthy here and Davey. And David, if people wanted to get a hold of you or reach out to you, how can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, David Lekach, Lekach. Instagram is David.Lekach, Lekach. I'm on Facebook. Twitter, although I'm not very active on Twitter. Again, LinkedIn, Instagram, those are all good places. My email is david.lekach@gmail.com. So if somebody wants to reach out, that's awesome. Probably the best way to reach me.
Well, you know, congratulations again. And, you know, hey, I've tried Dream Water. It works. I really love it. There was a whole bunch of different pieces. I love your website, by the way, the one that I've seen. I just want to thank you again for coming on the show. We probably go in again and talk about a bunch of you saw, this is why I told you saw how this could be expanded, right? Because we can go into so many different aspects of business, and the entrepreneurs I have on board love it because they're like, oh, that's a good idea. So I thought this was fantastic. I really appreciate it. Congratulations again on your exit. I want to thank everybody again for listening in of the ugly truth about sales, and then how to overcome these hollow statements. Again, I'm Victor Arocho. You can reach me at victororocho.com. You can go to YouTube, Victor Orocho, and my Twitter handle is @Victor Orocho. I really appreciate everybody listening. Ask us any questions in the comments. I could send them to David. We'll be building out an audio, and we'll probably have a transcript of this. So if you want to just listen in and see the things that that David did and some of the companies, feel free. And David, again, thank you, and you have a great weekend and enjoy your kids. That's one thing for me. It was always about balance. My kids, I'm an empty nester now.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a great day, brother.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Later.